Today, largely when someone loses their job, they're redundant, they're excess. In the future, they're going to lose their job because their job doesn't exist anymore. Like that will happen.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is say, okay, it's not about what you've done. It's not about your job title. It's about what you can do.
You don't grow because you're super successful. You grow because you fail.
So first of all, really excited to welcome everybody to the very first Work Intelligence Lab podcast. And today we start the podcast with two of the brightest minds when it comes to the future of work. Well, except for William, but we'll get there in a minute. When it comes to the world of work. And, this is going to help. Well, the idea of the podcast is to help businesses make decisions around data and what that really means for them, right? Becky, who has recently been promoted to President and Chief Strategy Officer. Congratulations, Becky. It's the first time we've had this role in the business, and it's going to make sense as to why we have you here when we get into the topics and some of the discussion. So welcome. William, I don't know where to start. You're an editor, analyst, advisor, host, artist, top 25 HR tech influencer.
No, stop it.
Occasionally,
Stop
I think you might be funny, but right. So I'm going to hand over to you guys to do a little bit of an introduction about sort of where you're at. And while I'm doing that, I'd be interested to hear around what you think one of the biggest misconceptions about the future of work are that need to be challenged.
It's a great question. I think for me, the kind of a misconstruction or misalignment, if you will, of the future of work is people think there's a destination. They think there's a done, like we get the there part, and it's not. It's an evolution. It's what I mean, as we have been for the last 200 years, we're going to be constantly evolving what we think is work and how we work. And every part of work is going to be, rethought of. And I think the big difference is the time lapse. Whereas, like, if you go back to the beginning of the internet, in the mid 90s, schools, colleges, universities had the internet. They used it as message boards. Then it became modernized and popularized when they put a browser on top of it. And then, you fast forward 30 years and you can't imagine life without the internet. Well, now you take AI as a for example, and it's not going to take 30 years. It's going to happen much faster. So there is no point in which we're like, yep, we got to the future of work. Made it. There's no such thing. It's just you have to navigate as best you can to get to the best place for you and your company, for you and your team, for you and your outcomes, and then from there decide what's next. And that's where I think data leads to analytics, that leads to some insight leads to some action, that connective tissue that goes through those. I think that's where it can feed back to you and say, okay, that was a mistake. Don't do that again. Do this, try this, go this way. And then it's trial and failure. Like what we learned in marketing, we're all had, stints in marketing at points in our career. I'm a recovering marketer. And it's like, it's A/B testing. So like, is there a new thing there? No. The future of work is you're going to be A/B testing everything. A/B testing all of the things that you roll out. That's people, that's process, that's technology, that's everything.
Becky?
Yeah, so first, it's super cool to be able to do this with William. So William, thank you for being on today. I would say I've been studying quite a bit on, this sounds crazy because I've been in this space for years, but I've been studying quite a bit the future of work. And so first, I would agree with William, there is no destination. There is just the next. What is the next and what is the next after that? But I think the biggest misconception is, people are saying human beings will go out of work. I actually think work is becoming more human. And if you go pre-industrial revolution, the Industrial Revolution was technology and process applied to work. It was AI, agents, automation. It's process and technology applied to work. And so I think what is left for humans to do, and I don't mean that as lesser than, I mean left for humans to do will actually be more human, the things we can uniquely do, and new human skills will evolve at the same pace that technology skills evolve. And so when people say to me, well, there's a dark future for humans, what are humans going to do? Is there going to be work? I would say bright future for humans, work's becoming more human. And we actually have to really exercise our soft skills around agility and change in a faster, more advanced way than we have, I would say, in the past. And so I think that's a misconception.
One of the points that is really interesting about the humanity, the human part of this is, imagine it's 1910 and you're in your horse and buggy, on some, dirt road, and all of a sudden a car flies by you. For the first time in your life, you see a car, whatever that car is. In your mind as a human, you either love that and you're like, oh my God, that's exciting. And that's on the adoption curve, which is a bell curve. That's the front end of that. That's like, oh my God, I can't wait to get one of those. And on the back end of that curve are laggards. You're terrified by that car. And so you're like, I don't know what that was. It was a spaceship. I don't know. I don't like it. I'll never have one of those, etc. That's the same thing with what we're talking about, the future of work. We've got to deal with real humans and the adoption of all of this new stuff. We can talk about AI or generative AI or agentic AI or whatever we want to talk about. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the adoption of said technologies. And you're going to have the mixture of early adopters, laggards, and everyone in the middle. So if you do a 20-60-20, that's basically what you're going to have is an adoption cycle or a life cycle. And how fast can we get the laggards to adopt is a game.
So and because I want to bring this a little bit back to the data and how we challenge it and how it changes, and you're talking about, AI is not going to take 30 years. And so I took a look back at McKinsey surveys, their global surveys that they do. In 2023, they predicted that 90% of HR decisions were going to be supported by AI-driven analytics to enhance decision making. So a year later, in the same survey, 1 in 4 respondents experienced negative consequences due to Gen AI inaccuracy, right? So, as we look to the future, based on some of these things that we've been believing and seeing and in the data, how does that connect? And I think for you, Becky, especially, right, hinging on all these pieces of data that creates fight or flight and what's going to happen, how does that connect to what you're seeing today as we move forward?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to William's commentary on adoption. How do we drive adoption? You don't drive adoption by saying, okay, go do this. We drive adoption by experiential learning, by people seeing, hey, I watch Netflix, and guess what? Netflix then says, Becky, you liked this, you'd like these other things. That's what we need to do in this space too, is make it real for people. And I'm not sure that adoption driven by work is going to be the fastest accelerator of AI adoption. I think it's going to be adoption driven by make my life easier at home and at work and at play and everywhere I am. And that will then drive adoption. It's frequently talked about the iPhone. No one tells me how to use the latest upgrade. I just figured it out. Like, I was so excited. I was FaceTiming with one of my girls and we did this on the screen and a big heart came up on the screen. Like, no one told me in the latest upgrade, if you make your hands in the shape of a heart comes up. We will learn by doing and we will adopt by doing. I think one of the challenges we're facing today as civilizations is we're expecting this to come in work, which is not usually the place people want to adopt something that makes my life easier. And so I think we really need to rethink, how do we insert adoption opportunities in the ways we live and the ways we work? And I think the former will drive adoption faster than the latter.
The bit for me is have to versus want to. Is as a pundit or any of those types of people that talk from a vista of not being behind a desk and doing the actual work. If you talk about have to, you've put people emotionally and intellectually into a box, and they get their defense mechanism come up. If you talk about, you want to, and then experiential learning is a great place for that, getting people incentives to try things. which kind of negates the conversation around failure culture and allowing people to fail. I think this happens so much in the corporate world where people are de-incentivized. It's punitive. They're punished actually if they fail.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, you're introducing new technology, which can fail and does fail, and then you're saying don't fail. Okay, that's a recipe for people not changing. That's change management 101. You've got to be able to say, hey, listen, we understand the technology, the process, some of our people, etc. Failure is a part of the bit. Failure is a part of learning. You know, if you equate it to muscle, the way muscle actually happens is you tear muscles, and
Hmm.
that's how muscle growth happens. Failure is the same. It's the equal. You don't grow because you're super successful. You grow because you fail. So we need to embrace failure and let people try stuff, bring stuff in, teach other people. So incentivize the learning to go across the organization, the consumer grade, products that are out there. Let them bring them into the organization. If we let IT and all IOs, CIOs, etc., if we allow them to dampen the spirit by overwhelming us with privacy, security, and fear, we're going to push and suppress innovation. So I know that they don't want to hear that. Like I get lawyers don't want to hear that. Like they don't want anything to be risky. However, you can't implement a new technology and allow people to just try stuff and be okay with failing and not deal with some risk.
So I think two things you said I want to speak to. First, the human spirit. The human spirit is one of trial and error, and so lean into that. Lean into the trial and the error part of it. But on this incentivizing, I'll tell you a story, William. One of our big consumer goods clients, FMCG clients, told me they'd spent so much money on putting AI into handhelds for their frontline. People who are ordering goods at the shelf, and they were getting like 20% adoption. And then that was giving suggestions. We suggest you order this or you do this quantity. And people were largely ignoring it. When they changed the interface to, if you do this, your incentive will go up by this, they got 99% adoption by making it personal, giving me motivation. And so I think we've forgotten the human motivation in this equation of, again, it's not about should or have to or mandate. It's if you do this, this is the benefit to you. And that is where I think we as business have to step in. And it's not technology and it's not the functions. It's we as business saying, what problems is this going to help me as a worker solve? And then help me see the value to me. And that's what I think we're missing.
And you just got to two experiences. The customer experience is better, and also the employee experience is better. So you've just made that by doing that, the company doing that, they've just made both experiences better. And so that helps morale, that helps retention, that helps all these other things that on the customer side, they had a better experience. And so,
Yeah.
like, because someone could help them and go, okay, here's what you should also be looking at, and here's something else, like somebody else, like that's you're giving them advice on other things that are legit, and they feel like they're informed.
Yeah. And they're going to make more money, which is what in this case the user was motivated by.
Right.
So win all the way around.
Speaking about sort of money and the future, you'll know this, Becky, very well. WEF has a prediction that 92 million jobs will be displaced by 2030, right? But at the same time, they are saying 78 million of those will create new ones, well, or will be new. And with this level of, how do we motivate people to adopt AI in organizations and all those sorts of things, is there a fear, or how do we make sure that the people losing the jobs are the ones who get the new ones?
So first, if I'm honest, I don't believe anybody's data because I don't think any of us see the future. We're all going to be wrong. Plus or minus something, we're going to be wrong. So let's start there. WEF is as good as any, so we'll go with that. But I don't think any of us see the future clearly. But to answer your question, what we run a big outplacement business. Outplacement just means when someone loses their job, we come alongside them and get them ready to get their interviewing skills up, get their resume ready to go back to work. today, largely when someone loses their job, they're redundant, they're excess. In the future, they're going to lose their job because their job doesn't exist anymore. Like that will happen.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is say, okay, it's not about what you've done. It's not about your job title. It's about what you can do. And what are the skills that you have that we can play in a different direction? And again, I see this, and I'm an optimist, but I see this as the core of humanity. We are problem solvers. We position ourselves against a problem with the capabilities we have. When the wheel was invented, it was, I need to get from A to B. What's a better way to do that than on my feet? Okay, well, I'm going to create a wheel. I'm going to put stuff in a wheelbarrow to give me leverage. Like that is who we are. And so humanity can do this. We can make this transition, but we need people to come alongside and say, okay, what are those skills that help you be agile, that help you change? And how do we angle you into jobs that are more future proofed? But there is no job, in my view, that is completely future proofed. And so this idea, and it's how William opened, this idea that we are there, we have arrived, I don't believe that. And so I think soft skills are going to become much more important. The ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is going to become much more important. And we as humans have demonstrated this historically, and there's no reason to believe we can't do this again. And we are going to have to, as we have always had to.
So the only thing I'd add is the skills development part is historically we've looked at that as static. You develop a skill in PowerPoint or in Excel, now you have that skill and you don't really have to refresh it. It's got a kind of a long tail to it. I think companies have to invest heavily in skills development of all their employees and executives. And it's a constant, it's never ending kind of thing. You're always going to be skilling up. And employees and candidates. So people that want to get jobs, they've got to be investing in their skills as well. So that's a never ending on both sides. Companies need to invest in skills, the next level of skills, and so do individuals. There's a responsibility as individuals. You need to be working on your skills. And so that the difference between how much jobs are going to be displaced and how many of them will be created is all based on the skills. And that metaphor of the horse and buggy before, there was a person back then that made wheels for horse and buggies, the buggies. Okay, that person could easily learn how to make wheels on a car because they understand the concept of a wheel. Yeah, they're using different tools and it's implemented differently, not on a wagon, on a car, etc. And it's the same thing for us. We need to learn new things pretty much every day. And I think we've gotten comfortable with the idea of we learn so much, we attain a degree or two or whatever, we get knowledge and we get fat and happy and we don't feel like we have to keep developing our skills. Those days are over.
Yeah, so I want to build on that because when I first joined this industry, so my entire background is FMCG. So I was new to this industry and I was 6 weeks in and I was invited to MIT, which was quite intimidating to me. So I'm like, I don't really know anything. Like, what do they want to know from me? And the whole headline was, there were two. One was all the truck drivers going to lose their jobs. And ironically, now 8 years later, still in the top 3 jobs in demand in the country. But let's put that to the side we don't see the future clearly. I don't think any of us. The second part was the CEO is no longer needed. And there were all these experts, and trust me, they all know a lot more than I do. So they're on the stage and I'm in the center of the stage and a bit intimidated. And they're talking about how we don't need CEOs anymore and the role of the CEO. And I said, you know what, I would say we absolutely will need a CEO, but it's more of a chief question officer because this idea that your career path, and I'm using CEO, but to any leadership of a function or anything, the idea that it comes from, I've done every job in operations, therefore now I'm a plant manager. I've done every job in the plant, therefore now I'm an operations manager. Like this idea of I've done it all and therefore now I'm here is irrelevant. It has to be, I've done some things, so I know the questions to ask, but I no longer hold all the information. My job as a chief question officer and to know how, kind of like a prompt engineer for the organization, I know the questions to ask, but I do not hold the answers. This idea that I know everything and therefore I'm here, that is totally gone, and that's not going to go. I believe that is gone today.
It was never there. That was just, and if you allow me, that was just male ego bullshit. So I'll just kind of call that what it was. That was just men doing what men do. And so I think that was never the truth. It's now it's exposed even more. And so there was no one with all knowledge. There's never been someone with all knowledge. No leader has all knowledge or even access to all knowledge. But I really love the idea of a chief questions officer. I think of it when you said questions, I went curiosity. I think they're maybe
Yeah.
not synonyms, but they kind of get to the same place. I think leaders need to have that ability to ask questions and hone that ability and keep, working on the ability
Yes.
skills to ask
And what
questions.
and what questions, because I think this is important, do we need to be asking ourselves as a business or ourselves as a profession which we've refined and built and we know is potentially going to change? What are those questions we need to start asking and thinking about?
Well, I would say there's two things that I always kind of think about with this. One is I don't know what I don't know. So when I interact with somebody, I was taught at a very young age you can learn from anybody. You can be in an elevator, and if you're aware enough, you can learn something. So there's a bit of awareness that's part of this. It's tuning, fine tuning your awareness to learn and be open to learning. So I think some of it is just you don't allow yourself to ever get to the point of saying or thinking that you know everything. In fact, you should start from a very humble position of I don't know. I barely know what I know. I definitely don't know what I don't know. But there's a Texas phrase that is gets to the point as well. It's I hear what you're not saying. And the idea is there's things that that person knows that I want to, again, I know what I know. I want to know what you know. I want to understand what you know and your understandings and your experiences and your failures. I want to know that. And that's curiosity, that's questions. So the ability to create questions comes from a place of humility and being not being on a mountain and being a person that's boastful and says I know everything. It's a humbling position. Every leadership position, sales, marketing, every leadership position is a humbling experience, and it should be.
You know, my wife's always right, but I need to get you on the phone to her so that you can just educate her on how that works.
Bring it.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a great phrase at Microsoft that they shifted from know it all to learn it all. And I think that indicates humility that's required. But to your comment on what are the questions we need to ask, I would say there are every question. Like we need to be super curious about how things are changing around us on a daily basis. So every question we should ask, which means instead of being in traditional organizations where we're reporting out all the time, because that's what we do, we report out. We need to be listening in. We need to be saying, hey, well, why did that happen? And what are you seeing change? And what's happening in the market where you live? And it's much more the role of leadership to ask, not evaluate. So this really turns management on its head because we see ourselves as we're going to listen to a report out. We're going to evaluate the quality of that report. That model is gone. And to William's point, maybe it should have never been there. It was there, but maybe it should have never been there. But now it's really leaders leading with the soft skill around curiosity and seeking to understand, what, and not even in work. What are your kids doing? How are your kids using technology? What are you seeing them? Where are they getting their news? Where are they learning in our industry? Where are they learning about jobs? Who's talking to them about career paths when they finish their secondary degrees or their primary education? Who's having those conversations? My kids, I have three girls. They get their news from TikTok. They do. It's where they get their news. They'll send me articles, and I'm sitting here going, I'm not sure that's true or not, but it is their truth, and it is their source of truth. And so that is a reality. There are influencers who are talking about new jobs and making jobs cool that we may see as older phrase jobs, and so that we have to be curious about today and plan for tomorrow. And yesterday is gone.
I think one of the things that I just want to add to this, because we've got the Global Client Council that we work with within Manpower, and one of the things that we're seeing where we're getting value, where the council is getting value, is people outside of their industry, outside of their sector. And they are being curious because everybody within their sector knows the same thing, hears the same thing, and they're hearing different things, and they can be more curious and they can they don't need to be the know-it-all in those conversations. So it gives them that ability to kind of harness that curiosity. But second to that, and you brought it up, Becky, and it's a good segue. And I think one of the things that you and William have in common is not only are you both from Texas, which is great, and I got to come at some point, but you both have several degrees, MBAs. You know, you come from the traditional educational, professional, you know, and I suppose, you know, data or no data, we know that majority of jobs and skills are changing because of AI, because of, you know, our hierarchical structures, organizational structures. So what is it that you think, you know, and Becky, you're talking to your kids about this. How are you preparing them for that change, for their entry to the future of work?
Yeah, so I'm distressed about higher education. So it distresses me. But the reason it does is the whole basis of how our university systems around the world are structured is this concept of tenure. So, how do I get tenure? I get tenure by being an expert in a very specific area with the assumption that that area will always have relevance. And then once you have tenure, it's really super tough for you to not be a professor any longer. And you get a lot of choice around first slots of time to teach and biggest classes and all these things. Whereas we're the opposite now. We're rewarding something that we thought would last forever. And yet you're hearing William and I both say nothing is lasting forever. And so we're literally in juxtaposition of what we need from higher education and what is being rewarded and incented in those systems. And so I have a lot of concern over who will fill this role of coming between workers to get them ready for work. I was with the Department of Labor earlier this week, in fact, and talking to them about apprenticeship models. And I shared, this is the US Department of Labor. For those in other countries, it's the equivalent of all of your government systems, the labor facilities, et cetera, in your countries. But the Department of Labor said we're incented to do apprenticeships. So we went to apprenticeships. And my reaction was, okay, nobody even knows what that word means. And you have so many programs that I don't know how to tap into them. And so interesting, good effort, not effective. And so we have to figure out how we angle all, because there's real money being spent there, but in many cases not hitting the target audience. So how do we get closer to the future workers? And I'm not even talking about going down into the 17, 18-year-olds or 16, 17-year-olds, get closer to those 18-year-olds, help them transition from whatever secondary education they have into the workforce. And whether that's with government support for pathways, companies like ours helping these new to career workers, but this idea of the universities are going to prepare this future workforce so that they start on day one ready, I don't believe we can count on that.
Do you think it is the university's responsibilities, or is that falling on the organizations now? Because I get a sense that the accountability is moving.
Universities have never prepared students for entry-level jobs. So that's actually never been the case. So, secondly, universities, we're watching dinosaurs walking. Fast forward, there are no universities, or if they are, they're for very specialized degrees that are needed, medical, legal, etc. And maybe even those change. I have a 19-year-old and 15-year-old, both boys, and I'm encouraging not to go to college, to go in either two paths. Either you jump deep into the waters of AI, or you jump into the trades. The godfather of AI at Google said, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that AI will not be able to manipulate things for quite a while. Like it will not be able to physically, it won't be able to put in your fan. It won't be able to run sewage. So the trades, welding and all these other types of things, yes, there's robotics, but even that's not as advanced as we think it is. So AI in its current form, as if you're a parent, they're not teaching it in school. They're not using it to teach in school. So they're teaching the way that we were taught. Here's your math tables. Let's go through your math tables. We don't need math tables. I can ask Siri what something is. I can even solve trigonometry with ChatGPT. I could just take a picture of the problem, solve it, and it's done. So you don't need to be taught the way that you were taught. So I look at it as my father was the first of his family, our family, to go to college. He got a degree in '58 in economics at St. Edward's University in Austin. I was second generation. I got a bachelor's and two master's degree, one being an MBA. And I'm coaching my sons not to go to college, not to go to university. It's a complete waste of time, money, and energy. So pick a path. If you want to learn AI and you want to go, if you're excited about that, you want to go that direction, jump. If you want to learn a trade, jump. And that's both are great. Both are great. I mean, we're a million plus negative deficit of electricians. We're about 700 negative deficit of plumbers in the United States today. That's much less tomorrow. So looking at the trades and saying, that's actually a really legit, it's always been a legit path, but there was other ways to make money, investment banking and doing all the other types of things. Well, a lot of those things are going to be augmented by AI. So you have to actually understand how it's being augmented or automated by AI to really be able to facilitate that, which means you have to get into AI.
I would disagree with William on one point and agree with him on another. So my disagreement comes from, for 30% of the American population, I do think that universities historically have prepared you for entry-level roles, sales, marketing, those kind of things. Now, the challenge is those roles are going to go away. And so we have a whole population that's graduating that'll have more education than we need, which is my second point where I totally agree with William. If you look at the baby boomers that are retiring at the rate that they are, the education level of the baby boomers is lower on average than the education level of the workforce, whether they went to university or not. So keep that in mind, whether they went to university or not, that education level is lower than the people coming out of our high schools and our colleges today. So this whole mismatch, and yet William's absolutely right. The skilled trades are more durable. When I said I've been studying this, I've worked with some of the best people to model where will jobs be disrupted in the next 5 to 7 years? Not even jobs. That language is going to go away. Tasks. Where will tasks be disrupted in the next 5 to 7 years? And what's interesting is we would have said, economically, by models 2 years ago, IT's the place to be. That's an insulated, when the economy goes through downturns, it's insulated. Guess what? When you look at the 5 to 7 year horizon, the technology space is much more disrupted, and the durable jobs or tasks sit in manufacturing. So manufacturing is back, and we need people in skilled trades. And William's right. For any of your listeners that want to connect with the skilled trades, we do that around the world at ManpowerGroup. And so please send your kids, all of you who work in high schools or secondary education that are coaching these kids about what paths they can take, please include the trades as a viable and profitable path, because our challenge comes from parents. So William, credit to you for coaching your boys differently. But our challenge is in parents and school counselors and how they're guiding these kids that there's only one pathway to work. And that is not true. And the one pathway that they're guiding them to is going to be increasingly difficult to find a job.
I also think additionally to that, there is this sense or culture that is the way things, we hand over generation to generation. That is what we go through. And kids, for lack of a better word, or the younger generation are still fixed on that is the path to their career. I've advised people from, Becky, the data we hold at ManpowerGroup and what I can see in future predictions, my godchild to say, do not go and do a 3-year degree right now. But it's not just parents, it's the peer pressure. And it's the perception of, if I'm not doing something,
Failure.
I'm not doing anything, right? So there is a shift in their mindsets that is not necessarily coming from the parents. So I would
in high school, Karla, we have here in the United States, we have college counselors, right? They should be thought of as career counselors, and at the
100%.
and at the college level, it's a career center which encapsulates all different facets of careers. not just getting a 4-year degree and then going out into the workforce and hope like something's going to be there for you. That probably was never there. I mean, it probably was an illusion we just kind of fought through, but it's for sure not there now. And I think the more that those career counselors think of a holistic, and there's no shame, which right now, again, I'll only speak from an American perspective, there's a lot of shame if somebody doesn't get a degree. Like my wife's having trouble with this. She's having difficulty with my advice to our sons because she doesn't live in that world. She works for my church, Catholic church. So she doesn't live in that world. So she doesn't see what we see on a daily basis and how the world's changing. She's like, Henry must get a degree. I'm like, no, he must not. That's going to be 4 years of his life that he just wasted.
I think this is something we can actually learn from the Europeans as Americans. So when I was chatting to the Department of Labor, like who's doing the best job of upskilling and reskilling, and they meant company, and I said France. France. Why? Who's doing the best job in the trades? Germany's doing a great
Germany.
job. The Netherlands is doing a great job. So we should step back and learn in the global ecosystem of whoever. We often say who holds the talent wins the future because we think there's going to be a shortage of humanity. But it truly is who holds the skilled trades, and the people who are interested in that will fuel economies. And that's what I think we're missing in our schools, at least from a US perspective.
Right. I'm in a great conversation, and I'm gonna wind it up now with one last thought from both of you. We are nearing the end of 2025. I started with some predictions of what 2020, in 2023, what that was going to look like. So let's forget the predictions. What are you most excited about to end this year on? Like, what should we all be excited about as businesses, as candidates, uh, you know, as professionals? What is that one thing?
Again, I hope I'm a pragmatic optimist, and so the future will tell, I guess. But I would say again, I've studied 5 years out, so that's probably where my horizon is. And we've got this humans, like humans, we know how to do this. We can adjust ourselves. We can grow. We can change. We've proven it. And I'm on the record saying, AI is the cape. The human is the superhero, and AI is the cape. And that to me is the future, and how we need to think about how does AI serve us in our home, in our job, in our families? How does it serve us do what we are uniquely qualified to do best? And that is do human work. And so I see a future where work is more human. There's more time for interaction. There's more time for socialization. The things that make us human, there's more time for that. And it's more impactful for businesses. And it should, I'll use the word should, back to William earlier, it should create economic growth for families, for communities, and for companies.
Yeah, very similar. My thing is we'll know we have achieved and maybe even reached a goal by the usage of not using AI in our language, our lexicon. So it'll just become technology. We won't say generative or agentic or AI. We'll never just take those things out and just talk about technology. Like when the internet was beginning, we talked about we're going to go search the internet. And then because Google was so dominant, we're going to go Google something. Well, at a certain point, it just becomes ubiquitous. And it's technology. You adopt it and you stop talking about the type of technology. And I think that's where software vendors in our space get it so wrong, is they talk about the how. The how is the agentic AI. The how is the AI itself. The how. Let's stop caring about the how. Like I've said this for years about Tesla owners. Most Tesla owners have no idea how their cars work. No idea. Zero idea. They just get in, hit the iPad, hit a button, and the car goes. And that's okay.
William, you've seen me with the podcast equipment, right? So that's a whole different story.
But that's okay. We don't need to know how. Like this fascination is really just we're nervous. We're at a nervous phase of we're pretty much too focused on the how. Like how does the AI work and how does this work? And we should be thinking about what is the outcomes? What are the outcomes of whatever this technology is doing for us, and does it meet our business goals? And I think we'll have achieved something, whether or not it's by the end of the year or by the end of 26, when we're not saying AI.
Okay. Nice. Well, listen, it was an absolute pleasure to have you both on for the first podcast. And we will continue to be talking to you because there is a lot to unpack as we go forward, especially with the intelligence that we have in the Work Intelligence Lab. So that we've launched, William being our new advisory council member there. So, challenging us on the status quo. And Becky leading the way with, what does the future look like and what are your thoughts? So look forward to connecting again. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Karla.